I'm here as the political veteran, and right now we're going to talk about President Trump's executive order on reinstating those people for that were discharged because of the mandatory COVID-19 vaccine. So approximately 8,000 troops were actually discharged from the military from 2021 to 2023, by the Biden administration and former Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, solely due to their COVID-19 vaccination status. For those that don't know, a range of vaccines are required while you serve in the military. We often, we have to take the smallpox vaccine when we deploy. A lot of us has had the anthrax shot, this series of anthrax shots, and you're required a lot of the flu shots, tendinitis, a lot of the other ones as well. And every year it's the flu shot you're required to have. And then often they'll add other ones to it whenever we've had like the bird flu a couple of times. I remember that one coming through, and that came in late as a separate vaccine that they rushed. I think in less time they did with the COVID vaccine. I remember it was probably around 2009 during that scare. And so those type of things have come up before. And when the COVID vaccine came onto the market and the DoD started distributing and requiring it because they require a large series of vaccines to serve. And so that one was one of the first ones to really be met with a lot of resistance, which surprised a lot of people. But then some other people, it didn't surprise them a lot because of the big movement of the anti-vaccine movement that has been growing among the civilian population. This is one of the first time that the military, active service people, and also from the Reserve and National Guard starting participating with it as well. So because there was a lot of pushback on the COVID vaccine. So this one is an executive order that I believe was signed on January 27th, so 2 days ago, reinstating service members discharged under the military's COVID vaccine mandate. That's what the executive order is called. So basically, it is making a reinstatement available to all military members, active and reserve, technically Guard as well, who are discharged solely for refusal to receive the COVID-19 vaccine, who request to be reinstated. This enabled those members reinstated under this section to revert back to their former rank and receive full back pay, benefits, bonuses, or compensation, and allow any service members who provide a written or sworn attestation, that they voluntarily left the service or allowed their service to lapse according to the appropriate procedures, rather than be vaccinated under the vaccine mandate, to return to service with no impact on their service status, rank, or pay. That one basically is saying if your contract ended before you had your final date to get your vaccine, or you would be discharged. If you just let your contract lapse, so you didn't re-enlist, they're saying if you get that documentation on there, they will allow you to also be part of this back pay. So this is allowing them to come back. And so within 60 days of this order, the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Homeland Security shall report to the President through the Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs on their progress in implementing this order. So we'll see how this goes in 60 days, because often after 60-day reports of executive orders or other reports, usually it's 6 months for legislation, usually they publicly release the reports that they receive. So we might get it in about 90 days. Because they might ask for an extension, and then they will probably apologize, smile and laugh about that. Because whenever I used to have to write deadlines and things, I would always try, if I had to make sure I had to submit it within a certain day, I would back it up at least maybe a couple of weeks So then, because I know I'm going to have to approve extensions, so I will make sure that the extensions go right up to when I have to submit it up to hire. So that's why I laugh a little inside, because there might be extensions requests on there. And so I expect we might get it in about 90 to 100 days, hopefully, that we get that released and we can see how they are trying to carry it out. It looks like that they are stipulating, if I'm reading it right, they're stipulating people to get the back pay if they come back in. Only if they come back in, not if, hey, I don't want to come back, but I want my back pay to the end of the contract or now or what have you. It doesn't look like that's what is being approved or stipulated here, which I know has been something that many has been questioning for those that have been separated from the military because they didn't get the COVID vaccine. And I know some of them will probably be hoping that they can get that back pay, but they might be reluctant to go back in because the way that they were treated might have put a really bad taste in their mouth. And it might cause a lot of issues because they might disrupt their lives more because they had to find new jobs in the new support system and they might be settled now. So that might cause a little bit more issues than it might actually hope for. So this was actually kind of part of, this is an extension of what Biden has already done, because when legislation, I'm trying to remember, when new rules were adopted in 2023, that basically made the COVID vaccine no longer a requirement to serve. They actually did allow people to be reinstated and come back in. And only a few people, right, 73 soldiers, 25 Marines, 13 airmen, and 2 sailors out of 8,000 people actually chose to come back. That's it. So we'll see how that one goes on how many people will actually come back. If they're really great numbers, I do expect a really big, flashy press release. If it's really bad numbers and very low numbers, I'm not sure if they'll actually release it. They might try to put it out with the trash with all the other stuff and might release it, but I'll keep an eye out on it because that's what Google alerts are for. And you can keep an eye out on what really could be happening out there. There has been a wide range of reasons why many people were separated because of the COVID vaccine. I mean, some disagreed with how fast the COVID vaccine had actually was pushed through. And they were worried about whether it would actually not be safe for them and things like that, which I will say with the research I've done on it, COVID vaccine is from the SARS vaccine, COVID is from the SARS virus. And so all they do is they weren't having to build it from bottom and basically from nothing. They were able to build it from other vaccines because it was related to a similar virus. So when you take in a lot of the information on there, it kind of makes sense on how fast they were able to go through. But I do understand the worry about the lack of testing involved before they were really bringing it out there and having people worry. I mean, when I served, I was worried about the smallpox vaccine and the anthrax vaccine because we heard pretty bad things, but it wasn't much on social media. So we just kind of went with it and did it. So this way, with social media the way it is, people got to read more things and hear more things. And so a lot of people were swayed on how that went. And it's understandable, given on the information you might have had access to. So that's okay. But this is saying that you guys can be reinstated with full back pay benefits, but it does look like if they go through with the reinstatement. I expect that within the next 60 to 90 days, they probably will have all the information out to recruiters because those are probably where service members would have to contact and so that they can get back in. Because usually the recruiters are the ones that will do all of that paperwork. If you're a private service person and your contract ended, you still have to go back to a recruiter to get back in. And often that was probably going to be the route, and they would have all of the information available by then in 60 to 90 days. I don't expect it to be very soon, but that could be possible because it looks like they've been ready for this stuff for months. So you could call your recruiters now to find out how that is working out and what is going on. So this is going to be a quite interesting thing on that for the COVID vaccine. There has been some things that people are not happy about because of this, because people are saying that, especially leaders, if you disobeyed a lawful order and policy, regulation, things like that, and then you get punished, you go through the punishment and the consequences, and then you have it wiped and then given everything back, they believe it could also cause an issue with good order and discipline. So it's something to watch out for, and we'll have to see what's going on with that. And from there, we can talk about the Pete Hegseth secretary nomination, because now, fully on the DOD, let's go through this on what happened. So this vote happened last Friday, and as we expected, all the Democrats voted against him. Most of the Republicans voted for him. The 3 nays from the Republicans was from McConnell, Murkowski, and Collins. And the surprise one was McConnell for a lot of people. So that actually made it a 50-50 vote. And J.D. Vance, Vice President J.D. Vance, was in the building at the time because he was expecting that he might have to come in and do a vote, because when there is a 50-50 split in the Senate, it requires the president to be the tie vote, president of the Senate to be the tie vote, and the president of the Senate is the vice president, for those that don't know that part of the Constitution. And so they break the tie. It's one of the few duties a vice president really has per the Constitution, is to tie break. And and this was actually, from what I have been hearing, is only the second time that they've ever had to use a tiebreaker vote for a secretary nomination. The first for a Secretary of Defense, because a lot of Secretary of Defenses in the past have been getting 100-0. They've been passing on voice votes, which basically, voice vote is what they try to do on most things when they think that they have enough votes to pass. And basically, they'll just ask them to say their yays and nays, and they'll vocalize it instead of going by name. What are your yays or nays? And usually, if you can hear it, the person that is ruling at the time in the chamber would actually, and it's usually the majority leader, sometimes he designates somebody to do it. If he can hear it, that there's more votes on the yes side than the nay side, then he'll say the yays have it. And then sometimes they'll ask for actual vote by name so they can get it all recorded, who does it. But when it's really obvious, they don't do that. A lot of people that have gotten those 100-0 votes are like Secretary Leon Panetta, Secretary Mattis. It's quite interesting on how often that those Secretary of Defense positions really had a unanimous vote on those issues. This one was highly contested, and there was a lot of heat and speculation about Senator Thom Tillis, because he had been speaking with a lot of people that have been speaking negatively about Secretary Pete Hegseth, because he's nominated and said his vote or did his oath. And so now he's been speaking to a lot of the people on the negative side, and he wanted to hear from former family members about his character and his past. And there has been people that said if he got these people to say it on the record, he will vote no for Pete Hegseth. He ended up voting yes. And so there was a lot of heat and discontent going for Senator Thom Tillis. from the left side about that, because he went back on his word, and also for people that went on the line and put their names out there to speak what their truth was about Pete Hegseth. So that's been causing a lot of stuff going on. There's been reports of senators that were leaning towards saying no, that received a lot of verbal and online abuse by alt-right and MAGA extremists. So some people like Deb Fischer, Joni Ernst, I believe, and some of the others that were leaning towards saying no were really threatened about not saying no. So it's caused a really interesting issue and speculation out there about all of the things happening around Secretary Pete Hegseth. I'm saying senator a lot, so I'm so used to saying it before a name. So there has been a lot of issues going along with his allegations of heavy drinking, aggressive behavior towards women, and a lot of the things that he said outright when on air, when he was on Fox and Friends as the weekend host or co-host, And there's been a lot of things out there that people have an issue with. A lot of them, one of them is actually his position about women in the military in combat roles. He himself had been in combat positions in the military when he served. And this was a lot of the times that he served was when I'm trying to remember if it was before the ban was lifted. I think he started before he entered the military and started his time as a combat person in the military before the ban was lifted on women. And even now, there's only very few women serving in the military in combat positions. So his exposure to women in those positions may not be very wide on that. So we'll see. It's quite interesting. I mean, I myself have not served in combat or held a combat position, but I have known of quite a few. And I worked in engineer brigade and division that had combat engineer positions, one of the few combat positions in the Army Reserve. And I was there and the sexual assault response coordinator to the brigade when women started entering combat engineer positions. I've met the women that they put a woman in as first sergeant when she reclassed to the combat engineer position, MOS, and they put her in as the first sergeant. So they know that, because this woman, was a badass. And so she was a really amazing leader and really amazing woman, and she could kick butt. And she did her combat engineer position in MOS amazing. I know a few of the women that's actually been able to go and get some of the really tough certificates and training that's associated. And it's quite amazing that they were able to do that and kick butt and sometimes do it better than the men. So we'll see how this goes with Pete Hegseth, because this could cause some issues with women in the military serving in combat positions, and it might change. And that's going to be a little difficult to do, because that might cause a legislative action to then change policies, or he might change policy that might make it unconstitutional, because it's part of the law that they pass. So it's going to be quite interesting to see how this works out. And there might be more judicial actions. I foresee some lawsuits happening if he takes a position to try to stop women from joining the military into combat positions, or try to remove those that are currently serving in combat positions. So we will see on how that goes. It's a little bit of a concern for a lot of people currently serving. There are a lot of people currently serving and veterans that because of Pete Hegseth's allegations against women. So there are a lot of concern about military sexual violence not being taken as seriously. And there is still supposed to be more things to be improved on the past legislation that has passed in the last couple of years. Some of them were signed by President Trump, and we will see if those that legislation will be followed through by the Department of Defense. I can imagine that's going to cause some hearings for us to watch and some studies. I can imagine that one coming out. So stay tuned for that. MST might become a very big topic coming up again, especially if studies come out that the MST rates increase. Although we won't see that come out, I foresee, for another 2 years or another year. For those that don't know, for a lot of the sexual assault, sexual harassment reporting and statistics for the military don't come out until every April, which is Sexual Assault and Harassment Awareness Month. So those numbers are usually posted from about the previous year. So we'll see how that works out. But the report coming out this April will be reflecting the previous administrations and the previous Secretary of Defense leadership. So we will see it next year in April, but I think that the biggest change we might see could be in 2 years from now, because a year can be a very short time for a lot of things to be taken effect, and policy change, and also command climate can be changed slowly, but it can be changed very quickly. So that will be something we have to keep aware of. For those joining the military that might be a little scared about what I'm talking about right now, don't be worried about that, because military sexual violence, it does happen, but it has gotten better in the military. There's been happening less often. Response to it has been gotten a lot better, and training has been a lot better. And so there are a lot of ways to go and take care of it if you run into those issues. Always look that stuff up, Google it, and try to find out where you can go. There's a lot of, I believe there's DoD SafeLine and a lot of other access resources that you can do. I will probably be talking about this in April, so stay tuned to that, because I foresee going over what's going to be going on with that in the future. And so we'll see. And some other things about Pete Hegseth is also about returning to the warrior ethos. From what I remember, there's never been a recension of the previous warrior ethos in those type of climates. So we'll see how that those policies happen and how they come out. I foresee actually more training on basic warrior-based tasks, which were actually removed, I believe, during the Trump administration, because they figured that the training was too much at the time and it wasn't a priority. So it might be a change that they actually bring back stuff that the Trump administration actually removed. But that's what it's sounding like from Pete Hegseth, because of the returning to warrior ethos. It's very reminiscent to those training requirements that we had to do every year, those annual classes and PowerPoint, death by PowerPoint sessions. And I apologize for the veterans out there that might be getting flashbacks or triggered by these words that I am now saying. But I have a feeling that that might be something that would be coming up. There would probably be some classes coming down about the transgender service members that will probably come out. And so we'll see how that goes. We have been seeing a lot of change on DEI procedures and policies and offices. I'm not sure if that is going to affect the equal opportunity advisors, and we'll have to see. I haven't seen any reports to that yet, but that is a possibility. And the problem with that is that the equal opportunity advisors can really do a lot of help in reporting, and they also do a really great job at doing command climate studies, not just doing making sure that people aren't being discriminated against because of their sex, race, what have you. But it might be they they do a really great job at studying the climate on how things are going on, because if there is a very toxic climate that's happening within a unit, more than likely there's more than one issue going on and more than one thing that's criminally happening within the unit. And more likely to have sexual violence as well. So often when I was a sexual assault response coordinator, I did a lot of work with EOs that we had in those units, and that can it can work hand in hand. And removing those EO advisors could cripple the sexual assault response coordinators, and make it, and those victim advocates that work underneath them, it could make things a lot harder. We'll have to see. I'm now thinking about the command climate surveys that the EO people did, because those were actually pretty helpful on finding out whether the leadership are doing their job or not. That's one of the things that's really, a lot of leadership have been getting fired for cause because of the command climate surveys of what has been coming out. And recently, whenever there are suicides happening within units, they also pull the command climate surveys to the units and looking at them more closely. And that's been happening in the past couple of years now. And that's been really helping out on weeding out the bad leaders and trying to root out the command climate toxicity. And so I'm really hoping that the EO advisors do not lose their jobs, do not get reinstated elsewhere, because the command climate structure study program is amazing and it really does help a ton. And so we'll see, keep our fingers crossed. You can always talk to your senators about that. If you have issues, if you see issues, report them, call your senators and let them know so that they can bring it up with Pete Hegseth, because they have the contact. Thank you guys. Have a great night.